From New York City, I'm Stephen Shalowitz, and this is the One Way Ticket Show. Hello and welcome once again to another episode of the show where we explore with our guests where they'd go if given a one-way ticket, no coming back. Their destinations may be in the past, present, future, real, imaginary, or even a state of mind, but once again, the only caveat, there's no coming back. Now, you can listen to all episodes on our website, theonewayticketshow.com. Once again, theonewayticketshow.com, or you can search for the One Way Ticket Show wherever you like to download your podcasts. And while you're at it, do rate and review us to make it easier for more folks around the world to find us. And one more point of housekeeping. If you haven't done so already, do follow me on all social media at Stephen Shalowitz. Stephen is with a V, at Stephen Shalowitz. Would love to hear from you. All right, as for this episode, what an absolute honor it is to welcome the internationally renowned architect and urban designer, Daniel Libeskind, to the program. Born in Lodz, Poland in 1946, Mr. Libeskind aims to create architecture that is resonant, original, and sustainable. He established his architectural studio in Berlin in 1989 after winning the competition to build the Jewish Museum in the German capital. In February of 2003, Studio Libeskind moved its headquarters from Berlin to New York City to oversee the master plan for the World Trade Center redevelopment. Today, Daniel Libeskind's practice is involved in designing and realizing a diverse array of urban, cultural, and commercial projects around the globe. The studio's completed buildings that range from museums and concert halls to convention centers, university buildings, hotels, shopping centers, and residential towers. And let me tell you, if I had a plot of land, I would be asking Mr. Libeskind to design my house. But since I don't own any property, yes, I don't own any property, but I do have a podcast, so I can very happily then invite Daniel Libeskind onto my show. He joins us now on the line via Zoom from way across town here in New York City. Daniel, it is so lovely to have you aboard, and welcome to the One Way Ticket Show.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
All right, listen, I have been such a huge fan of your work forever, and I heard you speak last year and became even more of a fan, so this is a real honor for me to be in conversation with you. I do want to talk about some of your projects, but before that, there's your one-way ticket destination, which we need to explore. So without further ado, Daniel Libeskind, if I did indeed give you a one-way ticket, past, present, future, real, imaginary, or even a state of mind, where would you go?
I would like to go to the Garden of Eden before there was a tree of knowledge.
Before there was the tree of knowledge.
Yeah.
And why is that?
And before Adam gave the apple to Eve, and before all that transpired. Well, because as Kafka said wisely, we once were in the Garden of Eden. We were in paradise. Why can't we get back to it? And he said that we can't back to it because we are too impatient, basically. And we are, in a way, too cynical. So that's why we're not getting back. I'd love to get back.
Is it that you want to go to a state of paradise, or would you like to go to the actual Garden of Eden paradise?
It's both. It's a state of mind, but it's also obviously a place of total beauty, unmarred by human avarice and human fatality. So the garden would be really the world as created by God in its true puristic intention.
And assuming you would know then what you know now, Daniel, what would you want to tell Adam and Eve about life after that first bite of forbidden fruit?
Well, I would tell them, you have to understand what that bite will mean. You know, what that bite and its diabolical dimension will open for you as you're exiled from this transformative period of being a human without the darkness that unfolds after. So yeah, that's a very interesting state of being.
Imagine if they listened to you, how different the world would be today.
Oh my God. Yes, it will be just a world of pure love and pure light and pure delight.
And what would you like to have done then at that time before the forbidden fruit was first bit into?
That's a great question, because it would be full creativity without any obstacles, creativity with any diabolical intentions in it. And some people would say that even aesthetics is already a diabolical art, because there is a darkness in aesthetics itself, in art. But I would like to know what creativity is without any of those dimensions of negativity.
Because I'd imagine the Garden of Eden would be the ultimate tabula rasa for an architect. So is there anything in particular that you would like to build there?
That's a great question. But, the conditions were so perfect that nothing had to really be done. They did not even know they were naked. It was just the perfect state of bliss. And don't we all want to return to this perfect state of bliss, a prenatal or post-mortem state of bliss?
I know I'm on board with that, Daniel. Absolutely. Is there anyone you'd like to take with you?
Well, I could take all the people I love and all the people I have not yet met but deserve to be in that world. So no devil worshippers.
Now, I know behind every great man, of course, there's a very strong, capable woman, and Nina is not only your life partner, but also your business partner. Do you think she'd be on board with going back to that time?
That's a great question. And Nina might be too bored in a perfect state of bliss. So she probably would prefer to be out of there and in the problematic world of politics.
All right. And to try and solve everything, right?
Oh, yes. Maybe I'm too lazy thinking about a state's pre-conflict, but there might be such a state that is possible for us still.
I hope
We have
so.
so many conflicts. We have so many conflicts around the world and everywhere in our souls, but there might be a sense of direct communion with forces that are purely in the state of transcendence.
Well, I want to dive into that in a moment as it relates particularly to your work. Is there anything from our time today that you would want to take back in time to show Adam and Eve? And what do you think their response might be if there is such a thing?
Well, if you brought any necessary work of art, Beethoven's Fifth, you would show that it's possible to attain that bliss, even in the turbulent world of our minds and spirits, that kind of recreates the sense of where we have come from or where we have been exiled from.
It's interesting you brought up art because Adam and Eve have been rendered throughout the ages by all of the great artists. And I'm wondering, what do you think they would make of their renderings throughout time as the artists have rendered them?
They would not recognize themselves because they had no mirrors before they tasted of the tree of knowledge. They were in a pure sense of themselves. So they would not even have the idea that an image could be created because an image already has distanced you into another world. And maybe the creation of image itself is the exile.
This is really interesting that you're bringing this up because it sounds to me like you've really thought about going back there. I could be totally wrong, and correct me if I am, but have you thought about it before I asked you the question?
I think, yes, I think everyone has thought about it. I think late at night or, in some moment of an accident, everyone has thought of themselves being in that state and wondering why they are not there right now and wondering if it will ever happen. Can they regain, the paradise of the lost world in some other way? And I think everybody has thought about it.
Absolutely fascinating. Well, listen, I want you to send us a postcard or perhaps a message in a bottle because I'm sure they didn't have postcards in those days. So throw a message in a bottle and throw it in the Tigris, and hopefully it'll make it to me. And you'll tell us what life was like indeed before then. But just building on your one-way ticket destination and segueing into your career, can you talk then about the role of an architect in trying to create a notion of perhaps perfection in whatever space he or she is designing?
Well, that's a great question because I think with the authentic creation of architecture, you're creating a world. You're really creating a world. I mean, that great drawing I think of Blake, where God is a geometrician, sits with a compass and creates the world, or even Newton in saying that God is a mathematician because he created a perfectly mathematical cosmos. Of course, the sense of creation of a piece of architecture is a creation of a world through light, through materials, through acoustics, through textures, through views. So definitely every building is a paradisiac state, at least when it begins.
And so as we try and move to a state of paradise, because I think that's really what what I'm hearing when you're saying, and you're talking about your one-way ticket destination, it's cannot we go back to that time that was a type of paradise? It does seem to me that an architect does have that sense of responsibility to create that paradise.
Absolutely. And I think creating a home, creating a place for
Mhm.
people to encounter each other, creating a space for discussion or being together, that is a creation of that foundation of a world that has a meaning.
And when we talk about nature, our regular listeners know, Daniel, that I've actually been to Iraq. I was there in November of 2022. And so I've been to Kurna, where the Tigris and Euphrates come together, which is where the Garden of Eden is said to have been. And I was also in the marshlands. And some say the Garden of Eden was actually there. And so when I think about that and your one-way ticket destination and the work that you're doing today, and you have done now for decades so brilliantly, I'm just wondering, what role then does nature play in informing your design, even in an urban setting that I suppose by definition doesn't have nature, but could have nature that you would want to create as part of that overall plan?
That is a fundamental point because we are a piece of nature. We are not just, what we think we are. We are also born without having a decision about it. We are sort of ejected from nature in our natal fate. And of course, nature is part of architecture. You cannot do everything in architecture is natural. And you might say that there are no inert materials, that everything is alive, that everything, that even the things that we think are not alive, inorganic substances, everything is alive. Everything is full of light. Everything's had the glimmer of creation in it. And so, yeah, I mean, nature is the greatest kind of miracle, and we are really part of it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
And would you say that nature is one of your starting points when you're designing a project?
Definitely, because nature is everywhere. You can't escape it. It's in your mind, it's in your soul, it's in your body, it's in the flesh, and it's in the spirit as well.
I want to talk about the social responsibility of an architect because, of course, I encourage our listeners to go onto your website, libeskind.com, to see your absolutely stunning work. And we'll, of course, have a link to it on the show notes page of our episode on this website, the onewayticketshow.com, on your page. You've done many high profile projects around the globe, including in my adopted hometown of Singapore. I have to give them a shout out as well. I spent many a year there. But not all of your projects are luxury apartments or museums or high-end offices. And I'd love you to really share your work in affordable housing here in New York City, because as I hear you now talk about this notion of creating a paradise and creating paradise today, that it's not only the physical of the Garden of Eden, but it can be recreated. It just reminds me of the work that you've done with affordable housing. And I'm wondering if you can make that connection and weigh in on it, Daniel.
Of course, because architecture is not only about architecture, but the ethics. It's about the
Mm.
others. It's about the other who you don't even know. And of course, we have so many homeless people who cannot afford to live in a decent place. I had a chance to win two competitions in New York, one in Long Island, and now a second one in Brooklyn, Bedford-Stuyvesant, where I built two social housing projects. Each one has about 30% homeless apartments. And I took it as one of my most interesting challenges within the limited budget, New York City Housing Public Housing Authority. How do you create something that's beautiful, that is it gives a sense of security, a sense of home, not just another statistics of filling a four walls with a human being, but creating something that means something for the life of a person who will be there. And I'm very proud of it. My Bedford-Stuyvesant, it's called the Atrium at Sumner Houses. It's a public housing project. Will open in a month, and it's one of the most interesting challenges, because I myself was born in a homeless shelter, and I myself grew up in the Bronx when I was an immigrant to this country in a first public housing project built in the United States, the Amalgamated Housing Workers Cooperative in the Bronx, built in the 20s. Building number one no longer exists, but it was in that famous film in the 20s called The Garment Jungle. So it was a housing project for working people. And my parents were both working people, worked in factories. And I grew up in this public housing project, which was wonderful. Of course, it did not have air conditioning. It did not have elevators. But it didn't matter because it had people who appreciated being together taking care of the place and being in love with the spirit of New York and its immigrant population.
Talk about a full circle moment for you.
Totally. Well, it's not by coincidence that I took on these projects. And I think Nina, my wife and partner, was also instrumental because we are such believers that we cannot just build for the elites and for the rich. We have to extend architecture. And most importantly, for people who cannot afford the housing on the markets of New York and other great cities around the world. And every country in the world, wherever I go, has the problem of affordable housing. There's just not enough of it. People can't afford to live in decent places. So yes, that's why I'm so happy to have participated in these two projects as an architect.
Right. It really gives people a sense of dignity. Going back to the notion of Singapore back in the 60s, that's what they did. They created these HDB flats, the Housing Development Board flats, to give people a sense of ownership and that they could have their own place and they could have a sense of dignity and help to build the country in that way.
When the building in Long Island opened, a woman made a speech and she said, I've never had a home. I lived on the subways. I lived in the parks. And I couldn't believe when I entered this building that is for me. I opened the door and I couldn't believe the space that I can enjoy. There was a bed. There was a beautiful window. There was something fantastic. And I thought to myself, that was the most moving thing I ever heard as an architect. Because it was about a human being. It was not about a statistic. It was about a person, and it changed their life. She said, my life has been totally changed. I'm in a different world now.
And that to me, at the end of the day, I'm sure is so rewarding for you as an architect. And again, trying to create this paradise on earth today.
It is true. I mean, today paradise might have not the same charisma as it used to have because we associate paradise with wealth. But we can create a, so to speak, a paradise even among poor things, among materials that are not the most expensive, a kind of a sense of life that can be lived with our means. And I think that's something that social housing really can do when the stigma of the social housing is removed. And when you think about it just as what can you do on this budget that can be beautiful.
Right. And paradise is such a simple thing for so many people. It's a roof over their head. It's a bed, right? It's a kid.
Exactly. Paradise may not be those glorious, vaults of heaven, but might be just the sound of a raindrop on a roof that doesn't leak.
Exactly. Well, I'm sure another rewarding project was your Maggie Center at Royal Free Hospital, which we're recording this. We should share with our listeners on February 21st. That opened up in Hampstead in London on January 31st. So really just a couple of weeks ago. Congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
Again, Maggie's Center at Royal Free Hospital. It's a cancer center. I'm wondering, is there a different approach, Daniel, that you take to designing something like a cancer center where you have patients and families versus housing and versus, say, for example, a museum or an office space?
No, I put the same sort of sense of imbuing this facility with light, with love, with a sense of intimacy, a sense that you're not an institution. You're not just in a big hospital, but you're in a place that cares for you, that gives you the human scale back, that gives you a sense of who you are as an individual. Even if you have been diagnosed with a terrible diagnosis, you're still a human being in this world, and you have to be able to look at this world in some way that has a hope in it. And I think that goes, for every good building. It has to give hope. It's not that you just finish the material construction, say that's over. It has to continue building the hope of what happens in that space. As the Walter Benjamin, one of my favorite writers, said, for Jews, the Messiah is there at every second, is a very narrow doorway through which the Messiah might just enter. And of course, Bruno Schulz, the great Jewish writer from Poland, said that his lost novel on the Messiah, he said something to the effect that the Messiah has already come, but we didn't realize it, that he was already here. And that's something that connects to our question of paradise. We might not realize we are already here.
Yeah, paradise is really whatever we make of it.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
And we might be missing it.
Right.
We might be missing it.
Well, I have to tell you, Daniel, when I saw that you had designed that, for, again, Maggie's center at the Royal Free Hospital. I had cancer last year. And so every time I had to go in for treatment, thank God I'm okay now. I've gone for my 2
Great.
scans and okay.
Fantastic.
But I
Fantastic.
thank you. But I have to say, every time I went to the hospital, it is such a clinical environment and there's no humanity. The people were just phenomenal. The staff was absolutely second to none and so caring. Yet it was the institution, the physical
Exactly.
surrounding that really was so jarring as one is getting treatment.
Exactly. And so the idea of Maggie centers is a very interesting one because it's next to this huge Royal Free Hospital, which is a gigantic machine, brutalist architecture back from another era, to create a small building that, in this case, is a very beautiful, I think, building that doesn't have any repetitive geometry. It's not like some sort of box with activity. It just provides the senses where you could do yoga, where you can cook a meal, where you can meet your friends, where you can meet doctors, where you can meet other families going through the same thing, or social workers who can help you. So it's a kind of antidote to your diagnosis, to the treatments that you go through. And it's a beautiful idea because Maggie has innovated the care for people with cancer, and they built these centers around England, around the UK. And so I had a great chance to build this one in London.
Yeah, because I kind of feel like architecture should help you rise to an occasion. And I felt like when I looked at that building, I obviously haven't been there yet, but when I looked at the photos, it really transcends one's feeling. And I'm guessing that really was the sense that you wanted to give for that.
Yes, I wanted to imbue it with a feeling of joy,
Yeah.
with a feeling of light, with a feeling of connection to others, with a sense that there is a diversity in the world, that there is a richness, that it's not just a machine to do something, that it's a poetic musical space in which you can wonder and think about many things that are not on your agenda.
And Daniel, staying in Europe, I'm absolutely fascinated by your extension. It's been completed for many years already, but by your extension for the German Military Museum in Dresden. And I'll speak like a millennial and I'll say that I'm absolutely obsessed with it
Thank you so
because
much.
it's dramatic, as is all your work. For me, what was so interesting about it, among many things, I should say, was that it was created outside the competition guidelines. And I'm just wondering, what was that conversation like to the committee, as if to say, I'm going to give you something you didn't ask for, but you need. And is that a situation you find yourself in? In other words, clients thinking they need one thing, but in reality, you show them that they need something else completely different. And then they say, you're absolutely right. So if you can walk us through that, and I want our listeners also to go on your site to see that image of the structure.
Well, the Military History Museum has been a military history museum since the 19th century. It's in Dresden. It was a military museum of the Kaisers. It was a museum of Hitler, military museum for Hitler. It was a military museum for Stalin and for East Germany. And then after the unification, the question became, what do we do with this museum? How do we go on with this terrifying history? Because the wars from World War I, from 1914 till 1945, Europe was devastated by the military history coming out of Germany, particularly. When I was faced this giant edifice, which was there, from all ancient times.
And so imposing, really.
It's imposing. And it was really kind of a ruin by the East German government. It was not very well maintained. It was falling apart. It was badly treated. First of all, I thought I'd bring it back to life. The armory is one of the largest in Europe, in Germany. So bring it back to life with all its 19th century ideas. But then I wanted to cut through it in a radical way, cut a kind of a wedge through it. And this wedge is a very particular directional vector, which shows you the 3 orientation points to which the bombs that fell in the Dresden bombings of 1945 were ones that destroyed all of Dresden, the Allied bombing. When you enter through this space, which traverses the entire body of the museum, you're interrupting the history of that armory, although it has exhibitions, but you're interrupting it between 1914 and 1945 through a view of the city that is astonishingly shocking, because you're seeing a rebuilt city, but you're standing in exactly the vector that destroyed the city in 1945. So it's a dramatic space which shows you the fatality of violence, fatality of war, and yet it shows you that in a democracy, the human beings are before the building, not the military generals. So the audience can actually leave the building, suspended in the winds of Dresden, of the outdoor world, and view the city in front of the building, kind of suspended on an oblique plane. It's hard to describe it in words, the sense, but the sense that in a democracy, it is the people who run the military, not the other way around. And so it's a museum which is not a museum of peace, but it comes as close as possible to transforming a military museum into a thoughtful museum of why is there violence? Why do people follow violent leaders? Why do they agree to shoot on command? Why do they agree to march? Why do they agree to do certain things? It poses those questions, doesn't answer them. The answers, and by the way, it's like the West Point of Germany. This is the place where officers of the Bundeswehr come to learn about the military history of Germany, which started in the Teutonic Knights in the 12th century. So it's a very powerful museum, very interesting museum. It has so many aspects to it.
And so when you presented the plans to the committee, again, they were outside the guidelines. Did it take much convincing? Yes. Can you talk about that?
Yes. In the brief architecture, it said you cannot touch the building, the exterior of the building. You cannot touch it because the historical facade.
Boy, did you touch the building, Daniel.
Yeah, I certainly did. I not only touched it, but I cut it.
Yeah.
I cut it violently, removed even the structure of the columns through the center of the building and created this movement of space. And I said to the generals, actually, the jury was the generals and admirals of German Air Force and Army and Navy. That's the client of the military. I said to them, you cannot just hide behind a 19th century facade. You have to show the power of violence, but also the power in a democracy of cutting through that history and emerging into a humanistic world. And that's what the building is about. And they understood the idea instantly, and they liked it a lot. Even though other architects complained, why did they allow Libeskind to, go beyond, their remit? But I think the generals and the jury understood that a building of this sort should not just reinforce the conventional ideas of the military. It should really expose the military to the public itself and say, this is your military. You're responsible for it. It's not what the generals do behind the walls. It's what you do in a democracy and who you vote for and how do you. So it's really a museum of democracy. It's a museum of continuity across the abyss of German history. And it's a very fascinating museum of seeing a destruction and resurrection of the city of Dresden at the same time.
Absolutely fascinating. I have not yet been to Dresden. I'm actually going to Germany in June, and so I'm going to hope to try and swing a visit there. So I'll be able to see it right in front of me with my own eyes. Let's travel a little bit east, because I do want to talk about another project that you're working on right now, and that's the Einstein House at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. What was the starting point? Because it's a twisted cube. And I must say, Daniel, I was actually surprised when I learned that this was being created, that there wasn't already an Einstein House at Hebrew University, because he was one of the founders of the university in the first place. So can you take us behind the scenes there?
Well, it was a wonderful project. Thanks to a great benefactor, Mr. Mugrabi, the building has been funded. It's, as you said, Einstein gave all his work, not to the Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton, but to the Hebrew University. He did all his writings, relativity and everything he did to the university, because he was one of the founders of the Hebrew University in the early 20s, when it was still Palestine, it was no Israel. And he said, if there's going to be a country, then learning, education is far more important than anything else. So this is an archive that will house and a museum for Albert Einstein, first building dedicated to him. It's been in the discussions for many decades, and I'm so lucky that I'm the architect. And of course, it's not just a kind of twisted cube, not at all. The question is, how do you present the issues of relativity in the world to the public? And, there's a very interesting discussion between Bergson and Einstein. In the 1920s, Einstein was giving a lecture on relativity, and Bergson, the great philosopher of simultaneity, Jewish philosopher, raised his hand and said, is the universe of the scientist the same as the universe of the people? In other words, do we here, mortals, who are not scientists, do we really live in a relativistic world, or do we live in the old Euclidean world where, our perspectives are very limited and we think they are not? And Einstein actually did not reply to that. Does the scientist live in a different world? He didn't. It was an aporia. But in any case, it's a building that shapes the experience of science, and of Einstein particularly, through materials. It mobilizes its space through geometry to create an ever dynamic space that is very controlled, very disciplined, but also completely mysterious. And of course, it has to function for scholars who will be doing research there. There'll be lectures there. There'll be exhibitions there. There'll be a permanent exhibition. There'll be gatherings, forums. There's an outdoor terrace to view the beautiful campus. So it's a complex building, but a building that really is a homage to Einstein and to his amazing personality and work.
Is it scheduled to be open this year, 2024?
I think in a year or a couple of years will be open to the public. It's underway, and it's an exciting project because it uses a simple segment of material to create ever-changing world of space, both internally, externally, clad, of course, with Jerusalem stone. It will be a sort of a testament to Einstein's work, which is like the Magna Carta in that building. You'll see the beautiful handwriting of Einstein and the theory of relativity, all his papers, all his amazing library that has art books and history books and not only science books. You'll be able to sit at his desk and think of how the world was changed by a singular, revolutionary idea of cosmos.
Oh, fantastic. By the way, are you okay to go over a little bit over
Yes,
for maybe
yeah.
about 10-ish minutes? Also, I should say, you must know Ido Aharoni.
Of course I do.
He's become a very dear friend of mine over the years.
Wonderful.
So, yeah.
Well, so many people made this building possible. And of course, building it on at Hebrew University is doubly meaningful because it's a campus from which my son also graduated as a scientist.
Oh, fantastic. So I'm sure you didn't mind revisiting the university. Well, it is one of the world's premier academic institutions. It truly is. I want to stay in Israel for a moment, and on a more somber note, actually, how would you approach memorializing October 7th, Daniel?
I think, to me, the only way to memorialize that awful day is to create peace. The only worthy memorial is to make peace, to cease the state of permanent war, and to recognize that people who have very different histories, very different agendas, have to somehow live in this small land and have to somehow share in the obligation and in the beauty of being there. So to me, the greatest memorial there would be a cessation of what we have seen in the previous decades, which is a permanent state of crisis and a permanent state of violence. That day was really a terrible day. It showed that Jews are vulnerable. It showed that hatred of Jews is there from different points of view. And it showed what it means to kill thousands of people in such a violent way through an ideology of hatred. So yes, the proper memorial would be the end of hatred.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you about that. Now, I have to ask you, a conversation wouldn't be complete without asking you about the master plan for the World Trade Center redevelopment. As I mentioned at the top of the program, you were the master planner for it. And I'm really just wondering, what goes through your mind when you're walking through that space today?
Oh my God, I walked through it for 2 decades or more. And it really has come back from a place that was so sad, so devastated.
Mm-hmm.
New York was altered so fundamentally. And then from that violence, from that sense of grief and loss of life in the thousands, came something that I had really thought about a lot, how to give it life, but not give it life by forgetting what happened. Give it life through the memory of the loss that happened there, and through remembering that thousands of people perished, and to remembering what America is about, which is about democracy, which is about freedom, it's a liberty, it's about tolerance, about living with others in peace. As I walk through the site today, I'm very proud that it works exactly as I thought it should. It's a place where people come to commemorate, It's a people come for cultural events. It's a place where people come to work without any conflict with the sadness of the day. And it's really, I think, an engine of resurrecting all of Lower Manhattan. I myself live in Lower Manhattan, very close to the site. And our office is right at the site virtually. But I can see how this part of the city has really bloomed, with new activities, with hotels, with residential buildings, with retail. So, yeah, it's a project which is very close to my heart. It's not yet finished, almost finished after more than 20 years, but it's very much like the first sketch I made for it, which is starting with the bedrock where people perish as a kind of sacred ground. And of course, no one declared it a sacred ground. It was only a piece of real estate. Only in the scheme that I proposed, and I was one of the only architects to say, where people perish should not be a building. You should not put buildings there. You should create a space of memory that is significant, that is memorable. And of course, it was also my idea to bring water. And of course, Michael Rudd did the actual design, but my proposal had the waterfalls to really screen the heavy traffic, the sirens around the site, and give people a sense of unity with the name that they read, a name of someone who had died there, who was murdered there. So from the memory of the day, through the history of the day, to the 1776 apex of Tower Number 1, which is the date of the Declaration of Independence. I know it's just a number, but it's a significant one. 1776. That's the first document of democracy in the world, really. And many other aspects. Slurry wall that was built. We saw it after something that should have never been visible. It's the foundation. I exposed that foundation so people coming into the museum can see this amazing wall, which is a testament to New York, to the workers of New York, that had that wall collapsed. That's a big dam. All the subways would have been flooded with the Hudson River, with the waters of the ocean. So I really celebrated the sense of unity in the democracy and what New York represents. And of course, all the buildings standing around that site are like a sort of torch of light around the central flame of liberty and memory at the center of the site.
So going back to your one-way ticket destination, it's almost as if you created a bit of paradise back down in Lower Manhattan.
Well, it is, no one is God, but you can have the ideals that drive our belief and our faith in the divine. And I think that's a necessary making up of an architect, because you're always making a foundation. You have to believe in something. You can't just make a building for profit or for a developer just because you've been asked. You have to believe that what you're doing has a sense of healing, has a sense of bringing something good to the world and for the people who will be living there.
Daniel, just one or two other bases before we push off, because I'm super mindful of the clock and respectful of your time. I want to ask you about music, because you were an accomplished accordion player, as I understand it, as a child. How did you pick up the instrument? Do you still play it today? And what role really does music have in your life today? Do you listen to it, for example, while you're working?
The music is the foundation of my life. I was not just an accordionist; I was a virtuoso.
Yeah.
When I won the America-Israel Prize for Music in Israel, I won it together with Isaac Perlman. And the year before, it was Daniel Libeskind won. There were not hundreds of winners; there were very few. And I was, as a young man, really supporting my family. I was, as my wife Nina says, why did you give it up? You used to earn much more money when you were 17 years old than you do now. But I love music, and I think architecture is completely a musical profession. In music and in architecture, there's a score, there is a master plan, there is a drawing. It's a code which has to be read by others and interpreted, and it has to have a sense of poetry, has to have a sense that it can be executed by others and yet resound with a certain harmony that you intended in the first place. So the art of music and the art of drawing, the art of architecture is very, very coincident. In my life, it's the same thing. I listen. I love music. I listen to music whenever I can, wherever I can, and I listen to it seriously, never as a distraction. And I listen to a very wide range of music, from Western music to Eastern music to eclectic music to contemporary music to popular music, because music is what moves the soul. And music, in a way, like architecture, is not an approximate art. It's a precise art. You cannot sing a tune approximately. It's either right or wrong. Just like architecture, you cannot make an approximate piece of architecture. Either it's good or forget about it. It's not even a piece of architecture. It's only a building.
And final question before we wrap, is there anything that you're working on right now that you'd like to share with us that you're particularly excited about? I know you've got a lot of projects going on, but is there one in particular?
Oh, there are many, but I'm working on the Tree of Life.
Yeah.
Tree of Life, the synagogue
In Pittsburgh.
in Pittsburgh, where Jews were murdered at prayer. I'm redoing, really transforming this entire site into a site that will now have a sense of a place that will talk about Jews, will be a synagogue, will be a center for studying anti-Semitism and what it is, bring people from all faiths to understand what America is about, what freedom of speech and religion is. It's a very important project because it's based on Jewish values and the universality of Jewish values in this world. Whether you're a Muslim, whether you're a Christian, it doesn't matter. It brings America back together, and it's a very, very important project in my roof. But I'm also working on a number of other museums. I'm working on a fantastic museum in Chile near the Atacama Desert for archaeology. Some of the oldest artifacts and mummies have been found in Chile. I'm working on amazing towers in Dubai, Baccarat towers, state-of-the-art skyscrapers. I'm working on homes. I'm working on so many projects, on city plans in Finland, an entire city plan for Tampere. My God, I can hardly sort of figure out which project I should talk to you about first. In Korea, we're working 14 different countries right now, projects in 14 different countries around the globe. So I'm such a lucky person. And working with my wife, Nina, who I love, and she is really fantastic. And the amazing team of people that I work with. I'm so lucky to be here and to do such wonderful projects.
And we're lucky that you were able to carve out a little bit of time. I shouldn't say a little bit of time. We were lucky enough to have you carve out a whole lot of time to join us here on the One Way Ticket Show. Daniel Libeskind, we want to thank you so much for joining us. Would love to have you back to talk more about your one-way ticket destination, all of your fabulous work, and more. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Steven. Thank you so much. What a pleasure being with you. I look forward to helping.
Me too. Okay. We'll have info about Daniel and a link to all of his work on the show notes page of this episode on our website, theonewayticketshow.com. And no matter where you are in the world, do shoot me an email, Steven@theonewayticketshow.com. That's Steven with a V. Share your one-way ticket destination. Let's even arrange a call and chat because I'm always up for a great conversation, especially about architecture. Meantime, it's a wrap for this edition of the One-Way Ticket Show. For Daniel Libeskind and the entire crew, I'm Steven Shalowitz, and we'll see you next time.